Hiya, it's Paul Cookson here, and I'm a poet, and here I am at Retford Library answering questions that have been sent in from children all over Nottinghamshire. I've not seen any of these questions, so I'll do my best to answer them as best I can. So the first question we have is this question. What is your favourite food? Great question. I think your favourite food depends on your mood. Sometimes my favourite food might be fish and chips. Sometimes it's pizza. But there are some things I always turn to. For instance, my favourite snack of choice is probably cheese on toast. Cheese on toast. I won't say it's my favourite ever food, but it's my go-to snack. Okay, next question. Let's see what we have here. Did you always want to be a poet? The answer is no, I didn't. The first thing I wanted to be was a footballer when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I was mad on football. And I loved playing football. And I played for my school team. But even that didn't make me good enough to be a footballer. And then I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to play guitar and be in a band. And then I couldn't sing. But I liked writing words. So I got into poetry. And I was a teenager. And the first poet who ever made me want to write poems was a man called Roger McGough. If you've not read any of his poems, look them up. They are fantastic. And he wrote poems that made me think, oh, I could write poems as well. They were short, they were funny. Sometimes they didn't even rhyme. They were just little thoughts or puns or plays on words. In fact, as an adult, since I've become a poet, I've used his poems in my books. One of my favourites is one of his called Emus, or is it called Kiwis? Anyway, emus and kiwis are in it. To amuse emus on hot summer nights, kiwis do wee-wees from spectacular heights. What's not to like about that? So I didn't always want to be a poet, but it's something that I did as a hobby, and then I became a teacher, and then 30 years ago stopped being a full-time teacher, and I became a poet. So it's a hobby that turned into a job. Okay, let's see what else we've got in here. The next question we have is, how many books or how many poems have I written? Well, I can answer the first question. How many books have I written? There are about 60 books that have got my name on the front. Now, some of these books here, like these books here, I've written all the poems in these books. Whereas lots of books are edited by me, which means I've chosen the poems. But there are 60 books that I've written. In terms of how many poems I've written, I don't know. I never really counted them all. I've been writing poems since I was a teenager, so I suppose if every poem was on a different sheet of paper, one poem equals one sheet of paper, the pile would be about, about that big probably. That many that are good, that many are, and that many that are not very good. What I have been doing during lockdown since March, I've been writing a poem every day. In fact, this book, now this is for grown-ups really, because I've been writing about COVID and everything that's been happening. I started this book on the 23rd of March, okay? That was my first poem. Now, this book finishes on the 3rd of July. There's 114 poems, but since July, because the next book's coming out in February, and that goes up to earlier on this week, I think it is, and I know I've written 226 poems this year that are for this. Now, there's other poems as well that I've written, so hundreds. I'm not sure that answers your question, but it does show you that I write quite a lot. Okay, next question. Here we go. What is your favourite film? Again, it's a bit like your favourite food. Depends what mood you're in. Sometimes I could be in the mood for something like School of Rock, something that's funny. I think my favourite film of all time, though, or one of them, is a film called Stand By Me. And it's based on a story by Stephen King, who's one of my favourite writers. It's about 4 boys. They're going looking for a dead body. Now, it sounds gruesome. A boy's been killed on a railway track. They walk along the railway track. It's not really about that. That's just a way to get them to stay out overnight and have this like moment of growing up. And I love that film. I can watch it again and again and again. And one of my favourite films recently was called The Peanut Butter Falcon. And that's a marvellous film. That's become a favourite. So, lots of favourites there. Okay. The Peanut Butter Falcon, by the way, it's a strange title for a film. And it's about a boy with, a young adult with Down syndrome who escapes from the home he's been put in and goes on an adventure with somebody who's on the run. It's a marvellous story of friendship. Anyway, He wants to be a wrestler. Do you use a computer to write? No. Well, I do, but not at first. I always have a notepad. I will always write down in pencil or pen on paper, and then I'll type it up on the computer. And what I like is, once you've written it on the notepad and paper, and then I'll say it out loud to myself as well, because I think the sound of the words are very important. I'll then type it up, and when I'm typing it up, that's often the time where I start editing and redrafting. But I very rarely, I'm not saying it never happens, but I very, very rarely type at a computer and do a poem straight away. It's pretty much always on the paper first. Okay? Right. What football team do I support? Well, my dad supported Everton. I'm from Lancashire, near Preston. I should have supported Preston North End, really. They were my local team, but my dad supported Everton, so they've been my favourite team ever since. And I'm lucky enough that I've actually worked with my favourite football club on a couple of events and a couple of projects. I did a poem called Everton at Home. In fact, it became a poem that I put in this book, and I think it's in this book as well, the football book there. And it's all about season ticket holders and going to home matches, and it got made into a film. I'll just read a bit of it out to you, actually. And it got made into a film, and the first time I saw the film was on the big screen at Goodison Park, and it was a magical moment. But it goes, it's who we are, it's what we do, it's why we're here, it's me and you, it's where we laugh and where we cry and where we shout and gasp and groan, it's where we meet week by week. It's Everton at home with those who care, at home with those who dare to dream more than just a football crowd and more than just a football team. So it's all about supporting your team. And even though I've written about Everton, it could be about your team. Okay, so Everton, my favourite team. Doing very well at the moment. Not often I can say that. Okay, what type of books do you like to read for pleasure? All sorts. And again, it depends on the sort of mood. If you're in an escapist mood, I might want to read an adventure story, or I quite like some horror stories by Stephen King. I like all Stephen King's books, but they're not all horror stories. Or I might like something that's witty, like P.G. Wodehouse. Or I might like Harry Potter. Or I might be reading the biography of one of my favourite footballers or a rock star. So it depends on the sort of mood you're in. But I love reading. Love reading. One of the most important things you can do. And of course, I love reading poetry. So I'll read poetry books every single day of my life. Okay. How many books have I read? I don't know. Hundreds. Probably thousands over the years. Some of them I've kept as well. I've got on my bookshelf at home, I've got some of the books I was given for Christmas when I was a child, like the Football All-Stars book from 1974 with a picture of Brian LeBone and Alan Clark on the front. Tell me how I know that. I don't know, but anyway. How many books have I read? What's my favourite? Lots of favourites. I think my favourite all-time book is a book called Stephen King called The Stand. It's about that thick, and I've read it 2 or 3 times, and it's a great story of good and evil, really. Okay, here we go. My favourite colour. You'd think it was black, but it isn't. My favourite colour is actually blue, okay? But I do like my black shirts. Still some more questions to go here. We have, what inspired you to start writing poetry? Well, I would say 2 or 3 things. The first thing was my teachers. I had a teacher at primary school called Mrs. Burton. And Mrs. Burton's lessons, they weren't about literacy, they weren't about fronted adverbials or any of the sort of literacy that you have to do these days. They were about stories and writing. And we all like writing stories at primary school. At secondary school, I had a teacher called Mrs. Graham. And again, she encouraged us to write. And then I got into reading poetry from Roger McGough, who wrote short and funny poems. And the first poet I saw perform live was a man called John Cooper Clarke, who's one of my favourite performance poets. He's not a children's poet at all, but he's got a great rhythmic style of performing. So I'd say Roger McGough was the first poet who made me want to write poems. John Cooper Clarke was the first poet who made me want to perform poems. And I'm lucky that I've met both these people. And I know them well enough to call them friends. Not best mates, but I know them well enough to call them friends. And I've used their poems in my book. Or my books, I should say, the ones that I've edited. Okay, here we go. This question says, how long does it take to write a poem? That depends on the poem. Some poems can happen very, very quickly. One of the very first poems I wrote for children many years ago was about 6 lines long, and it involved the word Pritt stick and the word lipstick, because I noticed that Pritt stick and lipstick, they actually rhyme, and also they look similar. If you twist the bottom of the Pritt stick, the glue comes up. If your mum twists the bottom of her lipstick, the lipstick comes up. I thought, what would happen if mum got them mixed up? Mum used Pritt stick instead of lipstick, then went and kissed my dad. 2 days passed, both stuck fast. It was the longest snog they ever had. And that poem probably took as long to write as it did for me to say it out loud, because it's just a little joke, a little pun, a little play on words. As I said, I've been writing a poem every day through lockdown. Most of these poems I've done within an hour, perhaps 2 hours at the most. And most poems in the book, particularly some of the longer ones, I would say a couple of hours. Now, it doesn't mean I write them for 2 hours in one go. I might write some ideas down, get stuck, come back to it, look at it again. With the poems in some of these other books, sometimes I've done that over 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously, with the Fighting Talk book, I've done that over the space of a day, because I'm writing a poem a day. Right, still a few more to go, and this one says, is your handwriting neat? It can be if I want it to be. But if I'm rushing to get all the ideas down, no, it's not. But neat handwriting doesn't make you a good poet. Okay? Do you have any pets? We used to have a dog, a Springer Spaniel called Max. He was great, but he died last year, unfortunately. And no, we don't have any pets. We've got 2 children, but to be honest, we preferred the dog. Okay? I don't really mean that in case they happen to be watching this. Is it easy to write a poem? Well, I actually think so, because I think everybody can write poems. And I spend a lot of my time doing sessions either in school or on Zoom, showing children and adults how they can write poems. I think the hardest thing is giving yourself the time to write a poem. If you give yourself the time to write a poem, and you write down all your ideas, and you're not afraid of the blank sheet of paper, and you just carry on writing, you've got to find some ideas in there that will turn into a poem. So I think people think it's hard to write a poem, but I don't think it is. I believe everybody can do it. Why do I enjoy writing? Even if I wasn't a poet as a job, I would still write, because I do like the fact you can start off with a blank sheet of paper and then you can write a poem. And sometimes the poem you end up with isn't the idea that you started with. I always think of ideas like a row of dominoes. So you push one over, it knocks the next, the next, the next, and the next. And sometimes it takes you off in different directions. Or sometimes you get 2 poems out of the same idea. There's a couple of poems in here. This is called There's a Crocodile in the House. And Liz Million, who's a fantastic illustrator, she did say to me, you are going to do some poems about animals. I said, why? She said, I love drawing animals. I said, okay. And here's 2 poems that I wrote on the same day, because they're sort of the same idea, but different. And I thought I could put them in the same poem, and I thought, no, I can get 2 poems out of it. So I like the fact that ideas can take you off in different directions and lead you into places that you didn't think you were going to go. So the first one is called Animal Confusion. And this is to do with animals and swapping their physical characteristics around. So this is something you could do at home. You could do this wherever you are now. Make a list of animals and then swap them around. Like there's a wolf with the head of a whale, and a shark with a waggy tail, a monkey with a long grey trunk, a cat that smells like a skunk, a giraffe with a hippo's head, and a mouse with elephant's legs, a parrot with crocodile jaws, an octopus with a tiger's claws, a porcupine all covered in fluff, a snake that has a shell so tough. And they may all be mixed up, confusing all of us, but nothing's as confusing as a duck-billed platypus. If you look up a duck-billed platypus, they are really strange looking creatures. They look like they're made from God's leftovers when he put all the other creatures. Oh, we've got some fur and a beak. Oh, put it together. It's a duck-billed platypus. Anyway, on the same day, I wrote this one called Jumble in the Jungle. And again, it's the idea of mixing the animals up, but rather than what they look like, it's what they can do. Way down in the jungle, everything has changed, everything is different, and things are very strange, because elephants fly way up high. Sad hyenas sob and cry. Giraffes all burrow underground. Silent parrots make no sound. Alligators climb up trees, snakes have all grown hairy knees. Lizards swing from vine to vine, gorillas leave a trail of slime. Rhinos wriggle in the river, hippos hiss and slide and slither. Speedy sloths are running races, lions pulling funny faces. All the zebras now have spots, leopards stripes instead of dots. Yes, everything has changed way down in the jungle. Things are very strange in the jungle jumble. So what do I enjoy about writing is you end up sometimes in a place you wasn't planning to go, and it's a great place because you've made up something new. Right, we've got 3 more questions left, I think. Here we go with this one. What is my favourite type of poetry? Well, again, I don't have a favourite type. I wouldn't say I do like rhyming poems, but if I only ever wrote rhyming poems, then it becomes a bit boring. So I do write poems that don't rhyme as well. But I do like rhyming poems, and I do like poems that sound really good when you say them out loud, so performance poetry. But sometimes I'm in the mood for a quiet poem, or in the mood for a thoughtful poem, sometimes a funny poem. So it depends, okay? What is your favourite book that you've written? I would say at the moment, these two are 2 of the favourite ones. Now, I didn't write this one, I chose every poem, but there is something magical about this book, not just because it's a subject matter, but just the, I even love things like that, the end pages, all right? I just think that was lovely. And the illustrations by a wonderful illustrator called Ailey Muldoon. I hope I pronounced that right. And her illustrations are fantastic. And they look old-fashioned, but modern at the same time. So that one, and then I just love this because obviously I love football, and my friend Martin is one of the best friends actually. Yeah, I love the fact that we've worked together on that. So those are my 2 favourites at the moment. And the last question in the bucket is, when was my first book published? Well, I'm going to give you 2 answers to that. The first time I had a book published, I was 18 years old, but I didn't really have it published. I just went to a printer and said, can you print that? So I published it myself. But I sold it to my friends at college, and that's how I started being a poet, as a hobby. My first book was published by a major publisher, by Macmillan, who I now work with. I think it was 1997, and it was an anthology called Tongue Twisters and Tonsil Twizzlers, all about things like Barry and Beryl, the bubblegum blows, bubblegum bubbles as big as balloons, or she sells seashells on the seashore. In fact, my friend Martin Chatterton, he illustrated the cover. And we didn't know each other then, and we became friends. In fact, for many years, we were friends on the internet through Facebook and social media. We knew we both supported the same football team, but we only actually physically met about 3 years ago. But he illustrated the first book I ever did. Well, can I just say, no more questions in there. Some fantastic questions. Thank you to all the people who sent them in. I hope I've answered them adequately for you. See you next time.